Last Christmas, I joined the Secret Santa thing at work. It was a small office, like, just 8 of us, so you knew everyone pretty well. When it was my turn to open my gift, I got this box, wrapped perfectly, like something out of a commercial. Inside was this crazy expensive watch. I mean, way beyond the usual $20 limit we agreed on. There was also a card, "For you, with love." I looked around, grinning awkwardly. Wow, okay, who's my Secret Santa? Dead silence. A couple of people joked about not having that kind of budget, but nobody admitted to it. I figured maybe someone was being shy or it was just a prank. I even thought, maybe someone mixed up their gifts. So, I just thanked the group and moved on. That night, I got home, put the watch on my dresser, and didn't think much about it. But then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Did you like the gift? I thought it suited you." At first, I laughed. "Haha, okay, who is this?" I sent back. No answer. The next morning, I mentioned it to a coworker, just casually. She shrugged it off like, weird, but probably just someone messing around. Still, I couldn't shake this weird feeling, you know? Like when you walk into a room and something feels off. Over the next few days, the texts didn't stop. They weren't frequent, but they were specific. Stuff like, "That shirt looks great on you," or "Did you enjoy the coffee this morning?" Little things I hadn't mentioned to anyone. At first, I tried to play it cool. Alright, seriously, who's behind this? Funny joke, but it's getting old. Still nothing. Then, one night, I got home late from work. My apartment was dark, and the watch was sitting where I'd left it on the dresser. Except, it wasn't. It was ticking. Loudly. The thing is, the watch was digital. It wasn't supposed to tick. I picked it up, flipped it over, and just stared at it. It was working fine, showing the time, but that sound, it was real. I couldn't sleep that night. Every creak in my apartment felt louder than usual. Around midnight, I thought I heard footsteps outside my door. My heart jumped. I stayed frozen, barely even breathing. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed again. "I loved seeing you today." That was it. Just those words. The next day at work, I told my friend Claire. She's the no-nonsense type, and I thought she'd just tell me I was overreacting. Instead, she gave me this look, kind of serious, and said, "You should report it. This isn't funny anymore." But how could I? To who? The cops? What do I even say? Someone gave me a creepy gift and won't stop texting me? She just shrugged and said, "Yeah, pretty much." That evening, I tried blocking the number. For a while, it worked. A whole day went by with nothing. But then, a new text came through, from another number. "You can't block me forever." That night, I decided I'd had enough. I packed a bag and drove to my brother's place across town, leaving my apartment behind. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not even Claire. I thought maybe if I disappeared for a bit, whoever this was would get bored and stop. But around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Running away won't change anything. I stared at the message, my blood turning cold. How did they know? I woke my brother, trying not to sound paranoid as I told him everything. He's a pretty laid-back guy, but even he looked uneasy. "Man, this isn't normal. You need to figure out who this is." He suggested I go to the police, but I knew I didn't have enough to give them. Just some texts and a creepy watch. The next morning, we decided to check the watch again. I hadn't looked closely at it since that first night. My brother flipped it over and pried open the back panel. Hidden inside was a tiny chip, some kind of tracker. My heart sank. Someone had been following me, literally, this whole time. We smashed the watch, disabled location services on my phone, and started digging through every account I had online, deleting anything that could give away my whereabouts. I didn't go back to my apartment. I stayed at my brother's, quit my job over email, and started looking for a new place in another city. The texts slowed down after that, then stopped altogether. It's been almost a year, and I haven't heard anything since. But I still catch myself glancing over my shoulder, wondering if someone's watching. Sometimes, when I hear my phone buzz, my stomach drops for just a second before I check it. The scariest part? I never found out who sent the watch or why they targeted me. It could have been someone I knew, or worse, a total stranger. I didn't think much of it at first. I mean, it was Christmas Eve, and spending it alone in my tiny apartment just felt pathetic. So when my neighbor, Mrs. Harris, invited me over for dinner, I thought, why not? She was always quiet, polite, one of those old ladies who smiled a lot but kept to herself. It felt a little weird since we'd never actually talked much, but I figured she just didn't want to spend Christmas alone either. When I got to her house, I noticed how plain it was inside. You'd think someone who lived alone might go all out for Christmas decorations to keep the loneliness at bay. But no, just a small, fake tree in the corner and some old, dusty stockings on the fireplace. The air in there felt heavy, I don't know, like the walls had secrets or something. But I brushed it off. It was probably just me being overly dramatic. Dinner started off fine, I guess. She had this weird smile plastered on her face the whole time, like she was trying too hard to seem cheerful. Then, out of nowhere, she started asking me these strange questions. "You live by yourself, don't you?" she asked, tilting her head like she was trying to read my mind. I nodded, confused, and she leaned in closer, her voice almost a whisper. "Does anyone know you're here tonight?" That made my stomach drop. I laughed it off, but something about the way she was looking at me, like she already knew the answer, sent chills down my spine. I tried to steer the conversation back to small talk, but she didn't let up. "It's nice when no one interrupts, don't you think?" she said, still smiling, her eyes not blinking. By the time she got up to get dessert, my fight-or-flight instinct was in overdrive. I didn't care if it was rude. I grabbed my coat and practically ran out of there. She called after me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see her face, her thin smile, the way she tilted her head like she was studying me. By morning, I convinced myself I was just overreacting. Maybe she was just lonely. Maybe I was the jerk for leaving like that. But then something strange happened. A few days later, I noticed her watching me from her front window as I left for work. She wasn't trying to hide it either. She just stood there, staring, not even moving when I glanced back. It was unsettling, but I told myself it wasn't a big deal. Just a coincidence, right? Except it kept happening. Every morning, like clockwork, she'd be there. Same spot. Same blank expression. And it wasn't just the mornings. I'd catch her outside my building sometimes, just standing on the sidewalk, not doing anything. Once, I even saw her in the grocery store. She didn't buy anything. She just followed me down a few aisles, not saying a word, until I left. At that point, I was seriously creeped out. I started taking different routes home, avoiding her block altogether. But somehow, she'd always find a way to pop up. One night, I got back late from work, and there was a note slipped under my door. It just said, "We need to talk. You left too soon." That note, it sent me over the edge. I didn't even touch it. I just stared at it like it might burst into flames. My first instinct was to call the police, but what would I even say? "Hey, my sweet old neighbor keeps staring at me and left a weird note." They'd probably laugh me off. Still, I didn't sleep that night, and by morning, I knew I couldn't let this slide. I decided to confront her. Bad idea, I know, but I felt like I had no choice. I walked over to her house, heart pounding, and knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Finally, the door creaked open, and there she was, smiling that same unsettling smile. "I knew you'd come," she said, like we'd planned it. I told her as calmly as I could that the note crossed a line, that she needed to stop watching me. But she didn't seem to care. Instead, she stepped aside and said, "Come in. I want to show you something." Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but curiosity, or maybe stupidity, won out. I stepped inside. She led me to the living room, where a single photo album was sitting on the coffee table. "Look," she said, gesturing for me to sit. I stayed standing. She opened it to the first page, and my stomach dropped. There I was, in a photo I didn't recognize, walking to my apartment, grocery bags in hand. The next page had another picture of me, this time sitting in a cafe. Page after page, it was the same. Me, going about my life, completely unaware I was being watched. "What is this?" I stammered, stepping back. Her smile faded, and her face turned cold. "You're special," she said, her voice flat. "No one else understands that, but I do. I've been watching, waiting." I didn't let her finish. I bolted for the door, half expecting her to grab me, but she didn't. I ran all the way home and locked every door and window. The next morning, her house was empty. No lights, no furniture, nothing. It was like she'd vanished overnight. That was almost a year ago. I don't know where she went, and I don't want to know. Sometimes, though, I feel like I'm being watched again. I'll catch a glimpse of someone in a crowd or see a shadow move just a little too quickly. It's probably just... I never used to care much about Christmas. It was just another holiday, you know? But a few years ago, something happened that I can't get out of my head. Every Christmas now feels different. It started on Christmas morning, when I found this little box on my front doorstep. It was wrapped neatly with a golden ribbon, like whoever left it really put in the effort. I figured it was from a neighbor or something. Inside was this creepy porcelain doll. It had this blank, wide-eyed stare, and honestly, I didn't think much of it. There was a note, though. It said, "For my special someone." No name, no signature. Just that. Weird, right? But I thought maybe someone had the wrong house or was pulling some kind of prank. I just tossed the box in the corner and went on with my day. Later that evening, I decided to check the footage from my doorbell camera. And that's when things started to feel off. The guy who dropped off the present wasn't someone I recognized. He had this Santa hat on, but no beard or costume or anything, just a plain jacket. What really freaked me out was that after leaving the box, he didn't leave right away. He stood there for almost an hour, just standing at the edge of my driveway, staring at my house. Who does that? I mean, how did he even know where I lived? Why me? I couldn't stop thinking about it. I didn't sleep much that night. Every little sound outside made me jump. The next night, I heard something outside my window around midnight. It was faint, like someone shuffling around, but when I checked, there was nothing there. I told myself it was just the wind or an animal, but the unease wouldn't go away. A few days later, after the snow had started falling again, I noticed footprints leading up to my door. They weren't mine, and they weren't from any delivery guy either. Too fresh. They came up to the same spot where the man had stood that morning, then circled back down the driveway. Whoever it was didn't knock or leave anything this time. Just stood there again. I asked my neighbors if they'd seen anyone strange around, but no one had. Some of them joked it was probably a secret admirer or some prankster. But I wasn't laughing. It was like this guy wanted me to know he'd been there. And it wasn't random. He was choosing me. By New Year's, I couldn't take it anymore. Every time I walked past a window or heard a noise at night, I felt like someone was watching me. I bought new locks, added more cameras, but it didn't help me sleep. I'd stay up, staring at the live feed on my phone, waiting for something to happen. Nothing ever did. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over.